instruments of your peace.
Where there is hatred, let us sow love.
Where there is injury, pardon.
Where there is doubt,
Faith. Where there is despair, hope.
Where there is darkness,
light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master,
grant that we may not so much seek
to be consoled as to console,
to be understood as to understand,
to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive,
it is in pardoning that we are pardoned,
and it is in dying
that we are born to eternal life.
Amen.
WESN.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. 3 masked men rob a woman at gunpoint in Endeavour. Licensing Division fraud case dismissed due to delays. Imbert denies $1.3 million office renovation claim. Padarath says WASA transformation won't mean job losses. Now for the details. A 63-year-old woman was robbed by armed men at her home in Endeavour on June 24th. Police say the woman told officers that around midday, 3 masked intruders entered through a kitchen window. One of them pointed a gun at her and announced a robbery. She handed over a safe with $1,200 containing cash. The suspects escaped on foot. Officers responded but were unable to locate them. CCTV footage is being reviewed as investigations continue, led by PC Raymond. 3 men accused of fraud at the Caroni Licensing Division have been discharged after repeated delays by the prosecution. Motor Vehicle Inspector Errol Supersad, Clerk Sudesh Radhakisoon, and Technician Adrian Mohammed were all separately charged in a 2022 matter involving forged vehicle transfer documents. The case, moved under the Administration of Justice Act, was dismissed by Master Adia Mohammed after the prosecution failed to proceed despite multiple extensions. Defense attorneys criticized the delays, arguing the system was misused and that their clients lost 2 years awaiting a trial. Former Public Utilities Minister Colum Imbert has rejected claims by current Minister Badi Padarath that $1.3 million was spent refurbishing an office during Imbert's brief time in the post. Speaking during budget debate on June 23rd, Imbert said the actual cost was $160,000. He accused Padarath of exaggeration and misrepresentation. Speaker Jagdeo Singh reminded Imbert that the matter was raised in a previous debate, but Imbert insisted he was replying to statements made by Finance Minister Devendranath Tanku, who said he stood by earlier comments. The House is set to meet again on June 27th. Public Utilities Minister Barry Padarath says changes at WASA will not lead to job losses. Speaking during the budget supplementation debate, Padarath said the former administration's plan threatened workers' job security, making it difficult for them to get loans. He claimed the current approach is boosting morale and productivity. Responding to opposition concerns about IDB funding, Padarath said discussions with the bank are ongoing and the transformation will be people-centered, not politically driven. He also accused the former government of underfunding WASA by nearly $500 million. But that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome to AM Prime on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. And this morning I'm joined by no stranger to the station itself, Dr. Shane Mohammed. He's joining me to help me unpack a few major questions on oil and gas. Can Suriname and Guyana realistically supply Trinidad and Tobago with oil or natural gas in the short to medium term? Would such an arrangement even be beneficial to us? And how do regional politics, diplomacy, and infrastructure either accelerate or complicate that possibility? So good morning, Dr. Mohammed, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Good topic.
Of course. So, and then, what I didn't mention, I also want to kind of visit the Petrotrin question, because I know that's a discussion that,
for sure,
it's been
it's very
up
relevant.
In the air. Yeah. So let's jump straight into it. Just off the bat, your thoughts, with Suriname specifically. We'll get to Guyana, but Suriname specifically, what are your thoughts on, them supplying us with oil? And because the discussion, I think, has been around that's not going to be possible anytime soon. Mm-hmm. So let's get into that.
Well, the thing about it is, one has to understand the environment. And when I speak about environment, it means that we must be able to look at what our opportunities are as a country and where we want to be of assistance, where do the strengths and opportunities, if you do a SWOT analysis on Trinidad and Tobago, from a governance perspective, what are the strengths and opportunities? What are also the weaknesses that we're facing? And what are the potential threats? And the threats meaning the economic threats that we are facing as a nation. And if we understand that SWOT analysis of Trinidad and Tobago as to where we are from a geographic position, from a regional position, from an economic, political, sociological perspective, then those that are opposed, or the naysayers that are saying that, well, Suriname is not ready, Guyana is saying no. So it's literally any idea or thought process of exploring opportunities for Trinidad and Tobago within the region is literally like mud, the train mud in the government face, because it's quick to, people are quick to dismiss. They're not ready. They're not going to say no. This is not feasible. How would we know? How would we know if something is not feasible if we don't start examining, asking the what's, the whys, the hows, the who's, the whens, the how much, the depths, the capacity? Well, if we don't start exploring those specific things and start engaging in a dialogue, first and foremost, I mean, Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign nation, and Suriname is a sovereign nation. In fact, Suriname is one of those few nations in South America that is still very much linked to their motherland, which is the Netherlands. Their culture, their sociological framework, their trajectory is very much aligned to anybody who's seeking opportunities in Suriname automatically see the Netherlands as the first opportunity, the first line of vision for those opportunities. And I'm saying that from the perspective that I've been to Suriname on several occasions, but I've specifically, a few years back, went to Suriname to engage with the Anton de Com University, which at that point in time was building out a postgraduate program for students. And the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, was seeking opportunities to expand and to provide offerings for postgrad students from Suriname to come to Trinidad and Tobago. And that then and that now has not come to fruition because there's a cultural divide. As much as people like to see us as within the same region, there's a cultural divide, there's a sociological divide there. And their upbringings and frameworks does not allow for them to see Trinidad and Tobago, or UE, I should say, as lucrative enough for them to venture in. So the development of Anton de Com continued into postgraduate, independent of everybody else. But the linkage to Holland, to the Netherlands, remained a very direct link, a very important aspect of their connectivity to the world. Now, that said, we also take into consideration that Shell is based in the Netherlands, and Shell is also a critical component to the gas and the energy sector. So Shell is also a partner, a critical stakeholder in Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector, and therefore it would be strategic if Suriname is exploring opportunities, because they are on the cusp of an energy boom. And I imagine more so now than they were before, given the current geopolitical happenings that is taking place. So those countries that are exploring, those countries that are venturing as new entrants or new existing entrants, and somebody may ask me, what is a new existing entrant? Well, a new existing entrant is somebody who is entering, who has entered, but it is still pretty new in the short term, as well as they're still getting their foot, getting a footing as to what the direction they wish to go.
Yeah.
So therefore, in light of that, Suriname is a space that we would want to explore, not just for the purposes of building a gas line or building some sort of connectivity between Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago, but also to lend our human capital and our expertise, which I strongly believe is a very important aspect of who we are and what we bring to the table, and one of our strengths as a nation.
I think that's a really good point, what you that you made there, that we can there can be some sort of exchange when in negotiating we can lend our help, and in return we get back something from them. Because what I wanted to ask as well, do you think that it was bold of us to kind of, I would say, jump the gun in the sense that when the Prime Minister announced, these possible relations or these possible, this opportunity to get oil and gas from Suriname and Guyana, it was almost premature, right? And then the Guyana's vice president, I believe, he made a statement saying that Guyana doesn't have any oil, no gas to supply, and the Guyana needs its own gas for their own electricity, and
that's the thing. That's the thing. I always say it's a matter of not what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
And this is going to be controversial, but Guyana has been riding on a high, and the riding on a high has put them as one of the fastest growing economies in the Western Hemisphere, as well as one of the fastest growing countries as it pertains to infrastructural development. But in the same breath, I would say that Guyana has not once, but has been more than once, twice, been told by the IMF that they've been selling their oil too cheaply, and therefore they need to revisit the price of their crude when they're putting it out in the market. Now, if anybody knows, I'm not a fan of the IMF. I believe that the IMF is nothing but a huge, exceptionally difficult and heavy chain and bolt that you put around the neck of a nation that does not give it an opportunity to doesn't provide it with a platform by which it will then jump into prosperity and development. It takes a very long time, and there are measures there that can put countries into a chokehold for decades, and by extension the people of that country into a chokehold for decades. So I will say that the World Bank is more developmental. The Inter-American Development Bank is also very much developmental organizations. The contrast between the World Bank and the IMF, while they are sister companies and sister organizations, their mandates are two different mandates. And once we understand that from an international organization perspective, then we tie that into governance and a domestic governance context. Then, and we are being honest and not politicking that idea. Then we are being responsible. Then there's a level of responsibility there for those who are driving a specific narrative. Now, I'm saying all of that to say that it is what Guyana said. It's not what Guyana did, it's how they said it. Guyana has become very aggressive. And over the years, Trinidad and Tobago, I stand by my statement. I'm not going to take it back. I believe it. And until I'm proven wrong, then, or somebody proves me wrong otherwise, then I will be minded to change my perspective. But I believe, and the evidence is more and more showing, that Trinidad and Tobago for the last 10 years has been on a back foot because of the callousness and because of the irresponsibility and because of the comfort of the previous administration and specific persons in that administration, recall members, it seemed to have settled into this is what it's going to be like for as long as we wish for it to be, because we've created a narrative about our political opponent, and as long as she stays there, we stay here. But that was a very hubristic, disconnected narrative that only they seem to have believed. And I say disconnected because they were disconnected from political realities. They were disconnected from the people themselves, and a lack of understanding of what the irresponsibilities of their administration and what the irresponsibilities or lack of innovation, lack of drive, lack of determination, lack of political will, lack of interest, lack of a lot of things led to the collapse of the reputation of a nation, collapse of the energy resources of a nation, collapse of the wealth of a nation, collapse. So it pushed and this is what poor governance does. Poor governance takes a rich nation and pushes it backwards, while those that are not as rich as that particular nation is surge ahead, because a good governance could take a country with little or no resources like Singapore and Malaysia, but have strong political will, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and pivot and push it into first world country status. So that's what we've been victims of. We are, as a nation, we are victims of that lack that I talk about. Now, saying all of that to say, a new government is entitled, prior to getting into office, in preparation to pivot to the nation as to what they can provide to the country in the short, medium, and long term. If very well expressed, communicated, discussed, exchanged, will be understood, because people want to know what their economic, sociological future looks like. That said, Guyana behaved in a manner that as if Trinidad and Tobago were beggars.
Yeah.
And I take umbrage to that, because the history books do show, the records do show, that in the years when Guyana did not know that there was gas and oil in their waters and territories, and when they were in a thrust towards developing but did not have the resources for it, and little Trinidad and Tobago possessed those resources and the wealth, Trinidad and Tobago did not hesitate, by virtue of Prime Ministers Manning and Prime Minister Pandey, right, to say to Guyana, we have the resources, we will give you the resources. But not only will we give you the resources, in what turned out to be about $540 million loaned to Guyana by both Prime Ministers, collectively by Prime Ministers Manning and Pandey, literally was written off by Prime Minister Pandey in excess of about $372 million of a loan that was written on because of goodwill, of good relations, of understanding that we need to be our brother's keepers. And it seems to me that the Vice President of Guyana has clearly forgotten those days. And therefore, that high that they're on has caused them to become a little bit hubristic. Now, we did not say that we want Guyana's gas. We said that we are willing to, if there's an opportunity there, to develop and to assist in the development, to provide support and to see where we can invest through human capital and how we can assist, but also how can we benefit. Because for every arrangement one gets into, there's going to be a benefit. As simple, and let us take a simple example of if you ask someone, if you don't have a vehicle, and you ask someone who has a vehicle, a friend of yours who has a vehicle, to take you from home, to pick you up at home and take you to Port of Spain for an interview, let's just say for a job. The question that one would ask is, what is the benefit for the person who's picking you up to take you? And it could be a simple benefit, that this is my friend, and this is my ride or die friend, and this person stands with me in hard times as well, and therefore it will be reciprocated in goodwill. Or two, we have not seen each other because schedules does not allow it, and therefore this is an opportunity to see each other. Or the other thing is, a simple gesture, I'll take you for lunch, my treat, and it also gives us an opportunity to connect. That's a simple, real simple, as easy as I can break it down in terms of benefit and exchange. The same applies. I do believe that the Prime Minister wanted to take Guyana's oil or gas for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago, but to see where there were opportunities, in the simplest of words, an opportunity. Now, I understand, and it would have been simple that if the framing of the language would have been, well, we appreciate the gesture of the Prime Minister, of Madam Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, but however, at this point in time, we are looking to take our gas and utilize it on our electricity grid to power Guyana. Simple statement would have been like, okay, we understand, but that would have also opened the door to say, if you need our assistance in our human resource capital, if you need advice, we've been doing this for the last 30, 40 years. We've accomplished this, and therefore we can help you with the do's or don'ts, the hows, the whens, the whats, the whys. That's just an open door. But they've chosen to go down a particular route, and that is Guyana. And
based on,
so be it.
Based on that, their initial response, do you then think that could possibly put us at a risk of being sidelined in the future, in future negotiations?
No, let me tell you something. I have in a conversation with a diplomat recently stationed in Trinidad and Tobago, and a question posed about diplomacy, especially with regard to this new administration and the new Prime Minister at the helm. I was asked, what was the greatest asset and what was the greatest strength of our Prime Minister, and when returning to CARICOM as Prime Minister, and then pivoting Trinidad and Tobago to the world. And I said the greatest asset that we have and that our Prime Minister has, beyond our natural resources, our greatest asset as a natural resource also is the resilience, the capacity, and the intelligence of our people. And I stand by that. We're bright. We are bright. We are experts in the field. We are experts in the field of law, energy, medicine. We are experts in several fields in business. We did not survive by VAPs. We did not survive. We've not survived just simply because of some fairy godmother. We did not survive because we took it to the Lord in prayer only. We survived also because we have been a generational grouping of people that sought and continue to seek after excellence. All of us, we are always looking for ways and opportunities to be ahead of the game. We are multi-degreed. We are looking for specializations. We are experts in the field. We are strong in that regard. And one of the things that we have as our natural resource capacity is our human capital, and therefore I make no apology. So we are right, and people can say whatever they want about us, but we are all over the world. We just saw, taking it a little further into the geopolitics, we just saw that we have multiple citizens in the oil and gas sector in the Middle East, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait. So what does that say? It means that we are so bright and our expertise is so sought after that we have gone to the various ends of the earth to provide services to people. And that is our strength. That is one of our major strengths. So no, we will not be sidelined. There's always going to be a reversion to our expertise. And that is something that is generational. We pass that expertise down to through generations, through mentoring, coaching, education, and whatnot. So I don't believe that we would be sidelined. What I do believe is that once there's a political will, and the people, that political will is communicated effectively to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, there's going to be the support for Trinidad and Tobago to seek out all opportunities available, including, if it means exploring what is available to Grenada and how we could provide support there, how we could provide assistance, how we could be a partner in boosting the Grenadian economy. When I look back, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves in St. Vincent and the Grenadines recently was celebrating the accomplishment of the Argyle International Airport, and on the wall within the Argyle International Airport, there's a wall that thanks the partners of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that made the dream of a state-of-the-art international airport for the island come to fruition. And on that wall is former Prime Minister Patrick Manning as a key partner in ensuring that is because of the goodwill and the good relations of Trinidad and Tobago to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Guyana can say what they want. They can go ahead and say it however they want to say it, insultingly or otherwise. But Trinidad was simply seeking an opportunity that if there's a space and a place for Trinidad to assist or to be involved and to provide or to lend assistance or to even benefit through refining, we would. And indicating that is important because we have to state our intentions and provide an opportunity for people to say whether they want to or not. And if they don't want, that's fine. And if Suriname wants to, then yes. I think also Suriname is at a crossroads. So they have just elected their first female head of government and head of state, which is President Jennifer Gurling. And so that now puts us to 3 women operating in the CARICOM Basin, which is a huge accomplishment because I don't think we've had in recent times more than 2 or 1 functioning within the CARICOM sector. So the relations between Trinidad and Tobago's female prime minister with Barbados's female prime minister and now Suriname's female president, who is also head of government because they have a federal government there, is going to be quite interesting. Women are seen as nurturers and women are seen in the line of leadership as the stabilizers of their nations, and they will do what needs to be, and that motherly instinct comes into play where they see the nation of the entire nation as a child that they must care for, that they must look after, they must seek out the interest for, and position that child to be on a path for prosperity for what in simple terms can be described as a good life. And in political science, coming out of the state of nature, a good life is defined by different needs on an individual level and on a specific and also on a holistic level, but one that does not provide for chaos and obstacles, and one that allows for rational thinking to problem solve and whatnot. So whatever that good life we aspire for as a nation, I think we are well positioned to achieve it with the grounding of a prime minister. And one of the successes that comes out of Barbados as a very simple case study for us within the region is that ability to continue communication and to open communication between the government and the people. And once that communication, those lines of communication remain open for information seeking and information provided, I think we would be in a good position.
Right. So in terms of value, do you think there was the way they went about it, do you think there was a hope in that these regional partnerships would offer a quicker return for us compared to reviving our local refinery?
Well, when we come to energy, we have to still, people pivot energy to be only oil and gas, but we have to take into consideration it's also downstream. And Trinidad and Tobago is still the #1 producer of methanol in the world. So we have to look at all of the good aspects of our energy sector that has been able to remain robust and to survive. And coming back to what you said to the question, is that we will always find ways in which our innovation is going to take over and our drive for opportunity is going to come into play. As it pertains to benefits, we have to see it from a spectrum, which would be a short, medium, and long term. We know that the government is on the cusp of putting together a committee that is going to look at the viability of the refinery. And I believe that viability of the refinery is really an assessment of understanding what is working, what needs to be maintained or put some maintenance needs to be placed in there before we can actually turn the key and start the engine and light the flame. And I believe that the team that the government is going to choose will be experts, as they say, in innovation, in business, in energy, in the various sectors, and they are going to be given a mandate that it has become urgent. There's a sense of urgency more than ever now for that refinery. And you see, last night when I was listening to the news, again, I don't want to sound critical, but I have no choice but to. Short-sightedness is a hell of a thing in governance, as well as, that grandeur of office can be a distraction for those who believe that they own it and they're not simply temporarily occupying it on behalf of, and that you're not an agent, because that's what the government is. And if I sound that to the present administration as well, that's what the government is. The government is agents, collectively is an agent of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and ministers are acting on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago by virtue of an election, and therefore they should not forget that, and they should not get carried away by numbers, because those numbers can swiftly, as we have seen in 2015, that those numbers can change very quickly in a 5-year period if you don't do right by all manner of men. And therefore, putting that into perspective, I believe that shutting down the refinery in 2018 was very narrow-minded, short-sighted. It was also as if you were literally taking a cutlass and chopping off 5 of your perfectly working tools on one of your foot, and then going, I didn't think this through. And even if you have arthritis or you sprained your ankle, you put in a temporary measure to fix the ankle, not to discard of the whole foot, because you have to think long term, right? And I think this bloodstream, this particular blood vessel of our economy, was clipped without long-term foresight and vision. And that's unfortunate because even if there was redundancy, even if there was a escalation in terms of blowing up of costs, even if there was exorbitant salaries and whatnot, streamlining, restructuring, there's so much business tools from a business perspective, from an innovation perspective, from an entrepreneurial perspective. There's so many different tools and mechanisms and approaches and methodologies that are available to realign and to change the business model of an organization, to set it back on a footing by which it can return to a state of compliance as well as prosperity, productivity, and revenue generation. So as much as Invert had and Young had some level of business acumen, clearly the business acumen that they possessed was just only for their personal businesses that they would have under their belt, and not for the business of the people. So at this stage of our, we are at a crossroads again. The refinery has become a state of urgency, and therefore we would want to, as the minister said, we'd want to capitalize on what the geopolitics is providing for us economically, and we would be foolish to pretend as if there's not a benefit there across the world.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my parents, and I called it the wealth of nations. How does the wealth of nations in geopolitics occur? Sometimes, in most instances, between 1945 and now, some of those, the wealth of nations have been acquired because other nations failed, collapsed, a man-made collapse that is, but we created wars and proxy wars that caused certain commodities and supply chain demands and all of that to skyrocket and prices to boost and wealth, and then markets became more robust and that sort of thing. So, we must learn from the past. So the past must inform our present, and our present must be guided by what we can do in the future. And therefore, I think in the energy sector, the Petrotrin refinery as a major blood vessel to our economic development is urgent, it's very pertinent, and needs to be as soon as possible within reasonable time frame, that is addressed and the turnkey starts.
So when you say that the Petrotrin refinery should there needs to be some sort of urgency there, right? Do you think that we can, are you saying that in the sense that, that in order for us to create a steady agreement with Guyana or Suriname, having our refinery back up and running could be some sort of leverage, that it would make the negotiating process a lot easier. And then we can have them as a reliable supply partner in a sense.
No, well, I think we in Trinidad and Tobago, there's been several discoveries of oil on land. So whereas we are experiencing that there may be a shortfall in oil in the sea, we've discovered in South Trinidad, Touchstone has discovered oil on land, and that's an amazing. I think that's that's critical for us as a small nation, that there are portions, I should say, of Trinidad, and especially in the Southland, where there are active oil wells that can be explored, and the exploration can continue there, the extraction can continue there. Touchstone is doing a lot of exploration, and Dr. Munila did say he wants to raise the amount of barrels of oil per day to an optimum level as soon as possible. Now, when it comes to things like gas, Trinidad is a gas producing nation, and we have the infrastructure through NGC and its subsidiaries, to LNG and its subsidiaries. And, my students were telling me only last night and 2 nights before in a class that, because I have not been to Mayaro in a very long time, there are several lucrative companies that are successfully operating in the southeastern part of the country in Guayari, where, especially in the area where Amoco used to be. And back in my time, and Amoco used to be an amazing facility of that drove was a driver of our economic prosperity. So we do have the infrastructure here as it pertains to maximizing on gas. I think one of the things as well, outside of the refinery being a blood vessel, and we have the infrastructures and the companies and the assets that contribute to us from a gas perspective, and we continue to see that Trinidad and Tobago does in fact benefit from having lucrative gas opportunities. The partnership with Suriname and the possibilities of exploring with Greendot, those are not necessarily arteries to economic development, but I think the Prime Minister, the way I interpret it, is that the Prime Minister is seeing it as veins so that contribute to our beating economic heart. And therefore, we're not going to be heavily, and we're not going to view our energy opportunities in a one-track mind, but we are going to look at it as how does the heart work and how does the heart beat. There's the working of the organs of the oxygen and the brain, the oxygen and the blood vessels, and everything that is contributing to that beating heart, and the flow, the blood pressure, So it's the idea here is that it's not that we're going to be a dependency. We're not creating a dependency syndrome, but we're looking at a partnership where we can provide, and it adds to what exists, and we're looking for new streams by which we can explore and provide, as well as provide services, provide capital, provide an opportunity for a source for refining, for development. Because we could also, because that's in the short. At some point in time, Suriname would want a refinery. I envision any ambitious country, any ambitious leader would also want to own assets of their own, right? So, those things take years, and therefore Trinidad and Tobago is strategically positioned to benefit in the short to medium and quite possibly long term. But on the other side of things, we also have to take into consideration that energy is no longer, and we are member of the United Nations. There is the UN Sustainability Goals, and those UN Sustainable Development Goals there are 17 of them, of which it's a mandate for all members of the United Nations to set out to achieve, and they range from the reduction of poverty, eradication of poverty and unemployment, to providing for protecting the environment with regard to life on land and life in water, and also for reducing our emissions in terms of carbon emissions and protecting the environment and having clean energy. And now, therefore, I think Trinidad and Tobago is well positioned, having spent all of these years in non-renewable energy sources and the development of a non-renewable energy sector. We should now we should begin as an urgency as well, our transition to non-renewable sources of energy, and we have the capacity for that as well, through solar and through wind, and therefore those two are things that are constant. We always have wind, and we always have sunlight, and therefore we should now also know the next step of our energy phase should be that we sustain our non-renewable sector. We diversify it through, as the Prime Minister said, we look at the opportunities for diversification of that energy, that non-renewable energy sector downstream. I expect that downstream production would increase, and we create an environment where that is sustainable, and then we should now start transitioning to the next step of energy development, which would be green energy through the implementation of solar and wind power. I think one of the things we should start looking at is we spend a lot of our natural gas on powering our grid. Now, this is where we are ahead of Guyana. They are now going to start that, and therefore we've been doing it for the last 30-something years, right? We've been able to stabilize our electricity grid through powering it through gas. But at the same time, we lose a lot of our resources and a lot of money by powering, if we continue to just power the sector, the electricity with gas. And therefore, we should now transition from a hybrid system where we are utilizing some of that gas for revenue purposes, but the replacement of that revenue that we will rely on from the natural gas we use on the grid would be to switch to solar, and where possible, start looking at opportunities to invest in wind. That's what is happening in Europe. That is what is happening in Curacao, right? Because Curacao is a desert. It's an island in the Caribbean that is part of the Netherlands. They have a refinery that was established because they are refining oil for Venezuela, and it is an arrangement between Curacao and Venezuela. And even that got them in a little bit of diplomatic trouble, where the Kingdom of the Netherlands had to intervene to the government of Venezuela and say, don't touch our asset, which is Curacao and Aruba and Bonaire, because those islands are our sovereign territory, and therefore, outside of relying on energy from Venezuela through the refining of oil and gas and whatnot there, they also established wind energy, because the wind is something that is always blowing. The higher you go, the more you feel the wind, and therefore it applies to Trinidad and Tobago as well. So, where we have this constant supply of non-renewable sources, of renewable sources of energy, then any responsible and innovative and entrepreneurial government will maximize on it.
Yeah. When we do talking about all these different possible partnerships and even just the Caribbean itself, right? I had this thought, and I'm like, do you see a future where the Caribbean could create a regional energy bloc or strategy of some sort where we, can work together and just have energy supplied throughout the Caribbean?
I think that was the vision in 1958 when Dr. Eric Williams and others were creating, we started the Federation, and it morphed into CARICOM. Now, I heard an interesting discussion made by Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves about a week ago, and it made sense to me because, as someone who studied and taught international politics, but also taught regional politics through CSME, I always believed that CARICOM didn't reach its full potential. That's one. And even in observing and asking questions and doing research on CARICOM, there's an imbalance in the CARICOM Secretariat as we speak, in that Trinidad and Tobago is one of the largest contributors to the CARICOM Secretariat in terms of funding. But when you look at the structure of the CARICOM Secretariat, the hierarchy of the CARICOM Secretariat has the least amount of Trinidadians in it. So that's something that we need to pay attention to. If we are one of the major contributors, then we should also be enjoying that contribution by having as much as possible of our citizens within the upper echelons of the hierarchy of CARICOM. That's one. Two, we are all at different levels of development in CARICOM. That's the one thing. From Bahamas come down to Trinidad and Tobago, we are all at different levels of development. In addition to that, our sources of development and our sources of revenue are different. The Bahamas is 100% very reliant on their tourism industry, and they've created a tourism industry where it's a niche, where it is unique, where people will quicker fly to the Bahamas or cruise to the Bahamas than to Trinidad and Tobago. PM. But other nations like Jamaica, who once had bauxite and who has enjoyed industrialization as well as agrarianism, as well as tourism, which is the non-agrarian, non-industrialization sector, have created a hybrid. And over the years, they suffered from economic losses, and they were under IMF conditions for many years, and this Prime Minister Holness was able to get them out of IMF conditions. A huge accomplishment for Prime Minister Holness and the JLP in their governance of Jamaica. They've been able to reduce crime and whatnot over the years. So having a hybrid economy is important. Jamaica has it. Jamaica recently also made a statement that they were going to re-examine entering into the sugar industry, because sugar is king, has been king. Sugar remained king even after Trinidad and Tobago destroyed our sugar industry. Sounds familiar? Right. And therefore, they're going to go back and re-examine entering into the sugar market and how they can create sugar. Perfect. I find that to be ideal. Barbados has their sugar fields, their sugarcane fields are beautiful, they are blossoming, they're blooming, and they're contributing to the rum industry in Barbados. But Barbados has also built a very niche market and has emerged as a leader in the CARICOM in tourism. And then there are other islands like St. Lucia that has the banana industry, but they also have, so there's a hybrid of agrarianism, some level of agrarianism, some level of non-industrial, but like tourism, right? St. Vincent and Grenadines, tourism, plus there's a level of farming that takes place with regard to their exports, Grenada with regard to spice and tourism and whatnot. So everybody has a niche area, and they are all at different levels of development, some higher, some lower. In fact, the Cayman Islands, when you look, it is interesting that the CARICOM region doesn't have the Cayman Islands as a full member of CARICOM, but the Cayman Islands, when you look at their GDP, they are in financial services. And I always wondered why it is Trinidad and Tobago did not explore. We have the IFC here, Mr. Manning created the IFC, and I gather in his vision that the IFC was a move towards diversification of the economy through financial services. We have not legislated effectively to ensure financial services can be a part of it, and therefore that's something that should also be explored from an economic perspective. The economists, the banking sector, the finance people should really put forward a proposal whereby Trinidad and Tobago explores financial. So you see, a lot of times also, and I think this is why the Prime Minister took a serious jab, and rightfully so, to the energy chamber, and all the chambers, in fact, because you are chambers of commerce, but can any chamber say to a political scientist, to an economist or sociologist, that they have written a paper with a proposal to provide a new opportunity for to add to the diversification of our economy? And I challenge any chamber of commerce out there to show me a paper that that has a pragmatic proposal that you can present to a government or have presented to a government that allows for your contribution to the diversification and the revenue generation and prosperity of the nation. And that's the thing. And I agreed with the Prime Minister when she said that what has the Energy Chamber done except for seek its own interest? And because they are the private sector. I remember Keith Rowley indicating that it is the most foolish statement that I have ever heard from a Prime Minister, that the government cannot regulate the private sector. Nonsense. That's absolute and complete nonsense. Because by you saying that the government cannot regulate the private sector, you mean that you therefore then just told the country that the private sector is more powerful than the government.
Yeah.
So then who provides the legislative directive? Who sets the policies? Who provides the pathway towards governance? It is the government. And if it is that you are making a statement like that, you are then saying that you've given away the country's governance to the private sector. That's not that. So therefore, there's a level of elitism that you've created by virtue of your statement. No private sector, regardless of how robust and how prosperous and how influential they are, can be more powerful than a government. Because at the end of the day, all private sector is subject to government regulations. And all of the literature, it will tell, in every single business literature and entrepreneurship literature, it will tell you that companies, private sectors, are subject to government regulations, rules, and laws. And therefore, I think when we have things like the Energy Chamber having the Energy Conference of Trinidad and Tobago, there shouldn't be a heavy reliance on the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs to be a sponsor. The private sector should be the sponsors who market and position Trinidad and Tobago, and the government should be a partner. And that partnership should be that we are a facilitator as well of that energy. We don't need to, we should not be investing a huge sums of money for something that benefits just simply the energy sector in terms of private sector. And therefore, at what point in time did the stakeholders in the energy sector come together and say to the government of Trinidad and Tobago prior to this administration, we think you're going down a wrong road, and were you vociferous, and were you aggressive, and were you adamant that you were going down a wrong road by getting rid of the refinery, right? So I think in that context, the Prime Minister took her position is clear, that if you are subject matter experts in the private sector, on the energy sector, in the field of energy, in the sphere of energy, then you should be leading it. Because entrepreneurship tells us that entrepreneurs, the definition of entrepreneurship, anybody can Google it and see it there, but the definition for an entrepreneur is when he or she sets upon this venture, it is twofold. One, yes, it is to promote economic growth and development and seek revenue generation for the organization themselves, and that by virtue adds a level of revenue generation and prosperity into the economy, right? But there's also a social responsibility where you are contributing to society, whether by employment, whether by innovation, whether by education, whether by training, development, etc., etc., etc. So it's also not a one-track road when it comes to the private sector. So I think the time has come for us to now challenge those in the private sector to also contribute to the discourse, and not just by talking and by having talk shops, but by actually having papers and proposals that add value, create, capture, and add value. And somebody out there is going to say, well, he's using taglines from an academic perspective. No, that's the thing. I can predict what people are going to say. These are not, I'm saying it because it exists from a very practical perspective. There are members and there's students of mine who are studying for higher education in MBA, especially towards their MBAs, who've come up with practical solutions and fantastic propositions in the area of creating and capturing and delivering value. And therefore, if they can do it from a student perspective, right, who are also professionals in the various sectors, then what is preventing those who are past being students, right, and who are subject matter experts and leaders in the field from doing the very same thing and putting a proposal to the government for how we can move forward? Because this shouldn't be a dependency syndrome. This should be a partnership.
Yeah.
We are all partners in the drive towards economic growth.
So how do you think we can go about creating that balance of power with the between the government and the private sector, especially when it comes to shaping our energy policies and moving forward as a nation?
Well, I think the policy, I think that we've set the tone. The Prime Minister set the tone, and she said that nobody's going to be a force upon themselves and live in an ivory tower and behave as though they're better than everybody, that they should be contributing to society. But I want to come back just for a second to the CARICOM issue. Yeah. I was saying all of this because I'm showing where at the different levels of development, some islands have gone ahead in their GDP. I mean, when you look at the GDP in the region, Trinidad and Tobago should have been at least in the top 3. We are number 5. And when you look at us globally, we should be more competitive. And therefore, when you look at islands like the Cayman Islands, who are susceptible to climate change and are very much in the direct pathway of major hurricanes, why are they so resilient? It's because of the support that they have from their sectors that support their economies. So I'm saying that we have the more developed nation. We have to take into account that CARICOM is separated between more developed countries and less, so MDCs and LDCs, more developed countries and less developed countries. And because of those levels of development, CARICOM has not been able to meet its mandate and to not be a simple thing as the CCJ. We're putting all this money into CCJ. We have the trust, the CCJ trust. We have provided a platform and a foundation for the CCJ to operate. But out of all of the nations of CARICOM, 5? I mean, there needs to be a decision about what we're going to do with regard to the future of the CCJ. And I think our friends in the Privy Council has made it very clear to Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the CARICOM, that you created the CCJ, utilize your highest court, because the CCJ, and contrary to popular belief, the CCJ does not, the RJLSE is not restricted to hiring judges from only CARICOM. Judges of the CCJ are open to also Commonwealth nations. So therefore, we can have a CCJ judge, which we do, from an African nation. We can have a CCJ judge, which we've had from the Netherlands. So we've had, it's an international court. Yeah. So once you understand the laws and you understand the remit and the jurisdiction, we have had people from the UK sit on the CCJ. So for anybody to say that the CCJ is biased because it's only made up of CARICOM judges, that's not a true statement, because judges of the CCJ come from across the world. And when the CCJ opens up a vacancy for a judge, that judgeship is not related, it's not restricted to just the CARICOM, or even in some instances the Commonwealth. It is open up globally. So we should be utilizing the CCJ in a greater manner. So to answer that question, with regard to the partnerships of CARICOM, there are flaws in the CARICOM structure.
You're right.
And I believe that while parts of it is, and the evidence does show that parts of it is aligned to the European Union, there are also parts of it that are severely flawed. And therefore, we need to explore whether, and that's a matter of, there's that argument where you may have to give up a piece of oomph of your sovereignty in order to look at the bigger picture in terms of a regional, to create a regional organization / an international organization.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, is where the difficulty lies. Now, coming into another part of the conversation, last week, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, I believe, is the chair of the OECS, and he also made a statement that maybe it is time for the OECS to examine whether it wants to break away from CARICOM and view CARICOM as a partner rather than be members of CARICOM. Now, is that a surprise to me? No, because having taught CSME, having understood CARICOM and the role of the OECS is those few islands of the Eastern Caribbean that they have more in common than different. Their levels of economic development are on par with each other, and therefore their thrust towards economic development and recognition internationally is more aligned, and therefore I could see that happening and see that being a reality. Now, I don't know how CARICOM is going to react to it, because if the OECS does in fact decide that they will depart from CARICOM collectively and they will be a standalone in the region, view CARICOM as a partner rather than to be members, then my notion that CARICOM has failed or is failing would now be, legitimized. So there are those issues that needs to be resolved, and it has to be resolved by political will. It has to be resolved from the perspective of viewing CARICOM as collectively as a bargaining power on the international scene. And I think Prime Minister Motley has done that to a great extent in her role as chair of CARICOM, but also as a leader within the CARICOM region. So in terms of partnership, I think there is always going to be a partnership there for us. Trinidad is available to all. I mean, we've helped. We are available to everybody for partnering and to be a partner and to be to play a role. It is whether or not those countries see us as see the need for us, right? Beyond just economic support, but as a human capital. That is where I stand with regard to that part of the conversation.
Yeah. So going back to your main point of this, that there are flaws within CARICOM as to why it would be difficult to have this energy block or this partnership.
The energy block, the energy block is also something you have to be careful about, because there has been conversations about whether we can put a pipeline from Trinidad all the way up the road. Right. Is that lucrative? We live in a seismically active region. We have volcanoes that are active. We have tectonic plates that are active.
Yeah.
So we have to take that into consideration, right? The world within the last couple of months, in the last 6 months, the world has seen some serious earthquakes taking place, some tectonic plate movements that is happening. We are seeing the mid-Atlantic ridge is shifting. Volcanoes are erupting across the world simultaneously, more frequently than before. Look at Iceland, look at Hawaii, look at Mount Etna in Italy. There's Guatemala, the Philippines. So those, we just had about a year or two ago, we had the one in St. Vincent and the Grenadines get up out of slumber. So those are things that we have to consider. What are natural disasters, or what are the restrictions to the realities that we want with regard to energy blocks for the purposes of that pipeline conversation, right? From an energy block, it should be a partnership of Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname. It doesn't seem possible because self-interest is playing us a great part. And again, everybody's within their right, because self-interest is not selfishness, because we are all self-interested. We are all seeking first our own welfare. I mean, even when we fly on a plane, the instruction is in case of an emergency, fix yourself first and then the person next to you, right? So in that instance, and then we also have this saying in Trinidad and Tobago that if your neighbor's house on fire, throw water on yours. So taking into consideration from a political standpoint, the notion of self-interest and the thrust of development, and again, I will be fair to Guyana, they are in a space of economic growth and development that they probably never envisioned in the last 40 years. And there has been need for serious infrastructural development in Guyana, and the need for development socially, economically, politically. From a holistic perspective, yes, it was needed, right? I mean, I think history will tell you, and history will provide the explanation for why there was such a mass immigration of people out of Guyana. And now Guyana is now seeking to have the generations that would have left kind of like return to contribute. I don't know how much of that will happen, because I think when generations have left and have settled outside and gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle, they have no problem temporarily relocating for the purposes of being what I would say visitor citizens. But that's as far as it would possibly go. Mm-hmm. So yes, they have to, from a domestic perspective, they have to seek their interest and that of the development of their citizens. So that I don't see them wanting to get in any sort of arrangement. But it's not, and that's again, I go back to that's their right.
Yeah.
And it's not it's a matter of what you say. It's not a matter of what you say, it's how you say it. And therefore, I think there's no need for the arrogance, and there's no need to be aggressive on their part as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago. Suriname, if there's an opportunity there for that partnership, by all means. But I think the partnership is not necessarily would be an energy block for the region. Trinidad is more looking to be a support system for Suriname as it embarks upon this journey of an energy boom. Other countries have already started to look towards renewable sources of energy. I mean, when you fly into VC Bird International in Antigua, they have a solar park there that it's, we should be ashamed. So, different islands are looking at ways in which they could power themselves through, sustainable sources. And sustainability is very important, especially where you are vulnerable in other areas, especially like climate change and that sort of thing. So I don't know how much of an energy block that we could create and be, because even we, Trinidad and Tobago, while we can supply the world with methanol, and while we have global standing in regards to natural gas and LNG and that sort of thing, we need to retain or regain our position as a major player in oil. Is that possible? We're 5 years, no, we're more than 5 years, we're 7 years behind. And in 7 years, a lot can happen in 1 year, a lot can happen in 2 years. So if it's 7 years, what I do think too, I will support any attempt to re-examine Trinidad's re-entry into the agrarian industry. And I do believe that the Trinidad and Tobago's present government should embark upon a revisit of the sugar industry. And if Jamaica can do it, then why can't Trinidad and Tobago do it? And the business model for that is not impossible to create.
I think
yes. So and we've just gotten some. We just received from India, if I'm not mistaken, but somebody just gave us 5,000 coconut trees. So coconut, rice, cocoa, and coffee. we should become more sustainable with regard to larger scale domestic agriculture, so that we could reduce the import bill. We should start supporting more organic approach to farming. We have a lot of land, undulating land in the tableland area that was once carried in 1975 limited property, which produced many orchards and fields of citrus. We should revisit it. We should not be building on arable land. I think that's a faux pas on our part. We should designate. I think the Minister of Planning should look towards designating lands for the purposes of strictly agriculture, and we should start looking at other opportunities as it pertains to providing affordable housing to the citizenry. So, I mean, I'm talking a lot because it's a holistic. We need a holistic approach to governance, right? And from where I sit, now is the opportunity with a special majority in the Parliament. It should not be squandered. It should be utilized to the benefit of the country for the long-term development of the nation. I mean, come next year, we will be operating on a 50-year-old Republican Constitution, which I think we can all agree is in 2025 very much outdated. And there are changes and amendments that are needed, constitutional changes and amendments needed in order for us to have a sustainable society and a sustainable democracy as well.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of the points that you're making here, I 100% agree with, but I want to go back to, because I had this point with CARICOM, and it's just playing on my mind. You know, despite the point that you made with the lesser developed nations and the more developed nations, you know, I think each country can contribute something in some way, shape, or form, right? And what I was wondering if, you know, there must be existing mechanisms within CARICOM that could be used to leverage, or that could be leveraged to kickstart, you know, an operation like this, or some kind of energy corporation. And if there isn't, then I think the entire CARICOM needs an entirely new framework, you know, because there must be at least one thing that can be used, because all our waters are connected, right? So creating some sort of energy relationship amongst each CARICOM country should not be as difficult, you know, and even if it's not specific, you know, to oil and gas, and the same points that you were making, we can look at renewable energy, solar energy, you know, different ways that we can power each country within CARICOM, and that come together and work. So, you know, the question then is, you know, do you know if there is any sort of something
collaboration,
within in CARICOM that can be used, that we can consider when thinking about kickstarting something like this?
So the thing about it is, there is collaboration, but the kind of collaboration that you are talking about does not exist from where, in my opinion, because there is the CARICOM energy policy, and there's also the CARICOM energy program that is listed in the CARICOM Secretariat. But it would be interesting for you to know that the energy partnership and the energy collaboration that is a focus for CARICOM is towards renewable energy, because it is the best way for there to be partnership among the CARICOM nations. So you have the renewable energy focus, where we are looking at renewable energy sources for development and for sustainability, right? Because a pipeline through the region is not going to work. One bad earthquake and then kaboom. And then we have embarked upon it from the perspective of it's supposed to be more towards a reduction of the imports dependence on the fossil fuel based energies. So that's that they're working on. But there's the this organization. Where is it? Everybody, CARICOM has so many. CRE. The Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. So this is a sub. There are so many subdivisions and sub-organizations, CRE and whatnot and whatnot.
Yeah.
They are, again, the challenge is that CARICOM creates policy. There's no system, unlike in comparison to the European Union, where the European Parliament mandates for policies adopted by the European Parliament to be mandatory adopted in domestic policy of member states. We don't have that here, and that's a flaw. The governing body, the main governing body, and the ultimate decision-making body of the CARICOM region from 1973 to now has been the CARICOM heads of government, and that heads of government meeting. And the other thing is, it's only within recent times that they've agreed upon, and a decision was taken, that decisions of the CARICOM heads of government does not need to be unanimously approved. That was prior to recent times, that was something that was required, that in order for a policy to carry, all CARICOM nations had to agree. So there was no space for dissension or to dissent. That has been changed from what I understand. But even so, there's no organism that allows for the policy decisions taken by CARICOM to be mandatorily implemented by member states. So there's no organism that allows for that. So all decisions made at the CARICOM heads of government meeting is not mandatory. It is what's the word? It is preferred, I would say. It would be something that they would be implored upon to do, but it's not mandatory. Another thing that in terms of partnership is that in 2018, when Prime Minister Motley was chairman of the CSME, she said boldly that as it pertains to food security for the region, that three countries specifically, Trinidad and Tobago, CARICOM, and Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Guyana should become the breadbaskets of the region because of one main thing. One, we possess the lands that were needed for macro-scale production of food. That's one. And two, that we were outside of the hurricane belt, and therefore the support that we may need in that thrust towards food security would be something that we could rely upon from other nations, like, so for example, seedlings and food, whatever. Trinidad could provide fertilizers, but we have not gotten there. We're 7 years again. That was 2018. Nothing has been done in any urgent form to create food security for the region. Yeah. And therefore, again, self-interest. Everybody is focusing on their own economic development, their own sociological frameworks, their policy agendas. There's no synergies because the political reality or it's a dog-eat-dog world.
Yeah, it's almost as though it's every man for themselves, and
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Unless there's a mutually agreed upon need that arises. So, for example, the one thing, and I hate talking about it still because I feel that it is such a sore point that was used to make excuses for us in Trinidad and Tobago, but the one thing that we sort of agreed upon within recent times was COVID.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we tend to agree upon would be relief in terms of providing relief for disasters. There's cooperation there. We even divided with regard to our position on Haiti. So, you know, I mean, I heard something from Roosevelt Scarrett the other day, and I was talking to a friend of mine in CARICOM, and I said, did he take a drink of a bad substance to make a statement that he was asking CARICOM to sit down and have a conversation with the gang leaders of Haiti? I'm like, what? That's not governance. That's putting a plaster on a gaping wound that needs to be dealt with, you know, from an international security perspective.
Yeah.
But, you know, so even things like that, CARICOM, I mean, Haiti is a member of CARICOM, but there's no solution and there's not a resolution regarding Haiti and how we should go forward on Haiti. And I don't think there would be, because they won't say it. Many people won't say it. They may think it, but they not say it. But who's paying attention to Haiti? Which nation? Which organization? International organization? I do remember, I recall there being an international resolution tabled with regard to nations coming together to put order and restore democracy urgently and aggressively in Haiti. Because again, no, the question is, no, what can Haiti give to the world? What Haiti give to the world was squandered. What Haiti give to the world in the 16th and 17th, in the 18th century, in 17th century, and the history books show you Toussaint Louverture and Saint-Domingue, what they give to the world, you know, and what was done to Haiti as a result of their richness that they would have developed in that time period was quickly taken away. So, you know, a lot of, listen, self-interest, self-development is going to always be, and we see it not just in CARICOM, we see it internationally, right? This proxy war that is now taking place between Iran and Israel, it's a matter of protecting oneself. It's the great debate of, there's not just a debate of religion, there's a debate of civilizations, there's a debate of democracy, there's a debate of sovereignty, there's a debate of security. So, you know, everybody has a different opinion, expert and otherwise, on who is right and who is wrong, and who should be involved and who should not be involved. And I think one of the questions that I have seen from a lot of people and I've been asked is, well, what caused Israel to launch a strike on Iran? And that's debatable by the various experts that will tell you. The IR experts, the political science will tell you a different thing. The economists will tell you another thing. The analysts will tell you a different thing from the scientists. So you'll always get a difference of an opinion on who is right and who is wrong. But nobody's looking at it from a deeper perspective. And it comes down to securing self-interest, and people are getting involved in things that sometimes they should not get involved in from a global perspective. And disputes should be dealt with the utmost diplomacy as possible. I mean, within recent times, even here in Trinidad and Tobago, the great debate about the Prime Minister's statements about Venezuela, but I don't think anybody's talking about, since the Prime Minister made her aggressive statement regarding Venezuela and asked certain questions to seek out information. In the last 2 weeks, that issue died a very quick death on the part of the Venezuelans, right? And I also think, I don't know, I don't understand, I should say, why were we so quick to jump to the defense of Venezuela and to downplay Trinidad and Tobago as being a small fry and incapable of defending our sovereignty. Because as far as I saw, that the Prime Minister, in a statement, knew exactly what she was saying and why she was saying it. And she said it with a conviction, as if she had already had an assurance. And there was this tailspin about, oh, we can't defend ourselves against Venezuela, and if Venezuela does this, that, or the other. And as far as I see, we like to get into old talk. But I would employ people to do a little reading.
Yeah.
And there's something called the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And if you read about the Caribbean Basin Initiative, then you would understand why the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago could have made a statement and be so resolute in what she said. Full stop.
As I mean, this would take us into a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to open that kind of rooms right now because we do have to wrap. But you know, Dr. Shane, thank you so much for joining me on the program this morning.
Well, thank you so very much, Audrey. This is quite you did poke at my political, my international politics and my you got a holistic academic perspective from business to politics.
Answered it so well. I'm satisfied with the conversation and the responses. You know, your insights are always so valuable, and
thank you so much
to our program. So. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.
You too, and have a good one.
You too. Thank you. All right. So that was Dr. Shane Mohammed. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you did as well. So we are going to wrap this morning. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. That's our quote for today. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So think positive, you know, and your day should, you know, go that direction as long as you stay and you keep good thoughts in your mind constantly, always reminding yourself of, you know, look on the brighter side and so forth. So don't forget you can engage with us on our social media, on our WhatsApp. Our WhatsApp number is on the screen, 682-9376. And leave your comments on our live stream, leave your messages. And stay tuned for Talking Point with Sean Michael Small on the hour of 8 o'clock. And that's all for today. Stay safe, stay inspired, stay informed, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really.